Hi, folks. Welcome to Tuesday's podcast from iWrite Radio, videocast as well. We're back to Nicola Sturgeon's press conferences today, so we'll have a chat about that to begin with. And of course, we have the Russian report, which is going to give us lots of fun to chat about. But we'll kick off with a press conference. Jimmy, you watched it. What do you think?
Yeah, usual fare, mate. Couple of interesting things cropped up. She had John Swinney there with her, and he kind of made a bit of a boo-boo, but we'll talk about that. But I think she had a good day again. I think it was interesting. Quite some of the press questions were what he really push on the Cytel sort of outbreak that's going on at the moment in the Lanarkshire, and she'd kind of told them at the start that, listen, we've got an incident management team in there and we're having a detailed meeting this afternoon, so I've no idea why they still led with their questions, other than the fact that there's no imagination in the press pack.
No, I need to respond to that one, Jimmy, because I've got a headline up here. Of course, I noticed straight away we've got the second division reporters in today, because the senior ones are off on their holidays. So the question then you got to ask are the second division ones trying to upstage their bosses while their bosses are away on holiday?
Possibly.
Well, they didn't manage it.
Well, exactly.
They didn't.
If that's him looking for a route into the playoffs or promotion, they failed miserably.
No,
I'm presuming that you think John Swinney made a mistake by saying that it wasn't certain schools would open.
I'm not so sure it's a mistake. It opens the door to all kinds of interesting stories, being scare stories, basically. If they've got a scare story ready to go about schools, it will be printed tonight. It will hit the newsagent stands tomorrow morning.
I think it might be a cunning plan.
Oh, I think it was deliberate. I don't think it was a mistake. He did say quite clearly, if the schools all go back on the 11th.
And I think the reason for that is because they're looking for the headline that says, schools not certain to go back due to pandemic, which allows a second bite of the be really careful out there, folks, cherry. It lets her re-emphasize that this virus is still out there. Nothing is certain unless it's controlled. So maybe I'm being too Machiavellian about this, but I do think that was one of the reasons. And he emphasized that the decision will not be taken until the 30th of June.
Well, that's always been the case, though, hasn't it? That the decision would be taken at the end of this month as to whether schools go back. And it has always been stated that it was on the proviso that we kept numbers down to a very low level. I thought her emphasis on the fact that there'd been 20 odd new cases for the last 3 days at the start, I think, again, it lets her point out, look, we're doing everything right here. And in doing everything right, there are still going to be small clusters and cases will go up and down.
I think we should mention the Kingdom FM Snap poll. Because we all know Fifers are really important to the integrity of the nation. Apparently, Kingdom FM Snap poll said that 3/4 of Fifers aren't happy about the change of rules for Spain, which in effect is you don't have to self-isolate when you come back. I was a bit surprised she didn't then turn around and say, oh, well, if they're not happy about it, tell them to stay at home.
Exactly. There's also the question as to where said Fifers get their information and how are they possibly better informed than the First Minister? Perhaps they have a secret line to Spain where they're getting information on the prevalence that's more updated than her.
Well, can I suggest that they probably were alerted that they were going to get their day in the sun. The Kingdom FM, the reporter, would be on live TV, so they probably ran this poll in anticipation of him being on live TV, and that's.
Do we have any idea what the listenership of Kingdom FM is?
Well, as I say, as far as I know, it's got percentage-wise, it's not as good as Border. Border, I think, is one of the highest percentage in the whole of UK. But Kingdom does quite well, whereas fourth, the percentage of Edinburgh listeners is very low.
So, anything else out of the presser?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when she introduced the testing, the data at the start, she missed out the people getting out to hospital. I'm not surprised, because it seemed to be a sort of dead bit of data that nobody was very interested in. We didn't get that. What we did get, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, when she was talking about new cases testing for the under fives, this was the first issue that she wanted to cover.
Yeah.
She seemed to talk about 25,000 tests being processed over the weekend. Did I hear that right?
No, she said that 25,000 tests had been done since over Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Well, that's still a hell of a lot of tests, isn't it?
It's a pretty good number, right? It clearly kind of flies in the face of what the bold Jackson keeps telling us, is that we just don't use our capacity at all. It's getting wasted. And
well, Jackson's had to shut up about that, because we are per head of population ahead of everybody in the UK on testing now, on a consistent basis. So we're testing more people per head of population. And so we can't start shouting about it.
Well, you know, the other day I was talking about, somebody was trying to put words into the First Minister's mouth about elimination. I think they were suggesting that she'd said totally eliminate at some point, because they'd stuck quotation marks round about it and used in some stupid article. I noticed that she may have been alerted to this, because today she talked about effectively eliminate. She didn't just use the term eliminate on its own.
Well, eliminate doesn't, in this context, mean what we think it means. Eliminate doesn't mean get rid of it totally. No. Eliminate means suppress it to such an extent that it's negligible. I was a bit confused about this, but it seems to be a technical term with.
Oh no, it's more than that. I mean, smallpox is the only disease that's actually been. I'm looking for the other word. Come on, you guys. It's stronger than eliminate. Anyway.
Eradicated.
Eradicate. Smallpox is effectively the only disease that's been actually eradicated in the world. There might be another one. Somebody can phone up and tell me.
Well, my understanding is eliminate doesn't mean to totally get rid of it.
No,
exactly. It doesn't. It's the medical terminology that means to take it down to a negligible level where it is virtually non-existent.
And I would like to just at this point out that all this excitement in today's papers about a vaccine, as people will keep telling you, all the experts will keep telling you, this is a coronavirus. The common cold is a coronavirus. And nobody's ever come up with a vaccine for that. I would stop getting your hopes up.
Well, a vaccine for the flu.
Yeah, but the flu is not a coronavirus. The common cold is.
The explanation I heard last night, the two-pronged approach where they take out the virus, but they also produce something else that takes out the cells that contain the virus.
Are you getting into the detail of how this vaccine works?
It seems to be quite successful. And is Ebola not a
look? If you want to go into
coronavirus,
no.
If you want to go into the detail, my most important medication, I'm not going to name it because I don't want to increase the run on it, has been labelled up as a treatment. It's a blood thinner. As a very successful treatment. It's a very expensive treatment in the United States. But if it becomes like that chlorhexidine that Trump punts, and some famous guy punts it, my supplies of a very important medication for me could be restricted. So,
well, the other thing on the news last night was the inhaler applied treatment that they've got that seems to be quite successful. It's successful for about 80% of a very small number of people who've trialed it. I think it was only 101 people, but it's been 80% successful within that
Yeah,
small number.
there's interesting developments going on. I think Stuart's right. I think the prevalence of politicians banging drums and waving flags about vaccines worries me, because politicians really shouldn't be making these announcements. You just know that they're desperate to claim any kind of reflected glory should there be successful either vaccine or successful treatments appear, that politicians will desperately want to bask in the glory of that. But I think we should take everything that we do see with a big pinch of salt.
Well, there seems to have been good strides both in treating it and in the possibility of a vaccine. I think we should move on to the other.
Just before you do, mate, I just want to point out this outbreak in Lanarkshire. This is still going to be a story. Particularly, a couple of things that I noticed last night about it. Labour politicians claiming that they've been getting emails about this company not following social distancing rules since April. And I'd like to point out to said Labour politicians, what did you do about it? One of them being Monica Lennon, who last night said that she'd received said complaints and then went on to say, I have no idea how they could get a contract dealing for public health. She couldn't bring herself to say the word England, as that American company are contracted.
Well, she also tweeted at one point that it was nothing to do with the company where the outbreak was. The complaints she was getting were from another company in the same building.
Really? That's interesting.
I believe Virgin have a workforce in there. I don't know what they're doing, but apparently it was from them.
Last night that she had been getting complaints primarily concerned with that company. So,
well, look, I've never worked in a call centre, but we all know plenty of people who have, because they're all over the place. From what I know, they sit in the same big room, dozens and dozens of people working, and they don't all work. Just because they're in one room doesn't mean they all work on the one contract.
Aye.
Well, they could be sat side by side on totally different contracts.
Here's a strange question for you, right? As she said today, Nicola Sturgeon said today, that they're all now working from home. What were they doing in the office in the first place if they're all now working from home? Because the rules in Scotland are still work from home if you can.
Yeah, but this company made it clear that they didn't want people working from home. The experienced people, i.e. people who have worked for them for more than 3 months, could work from home. But anybody had just been taken on, and presumably anybody that was working in not anybody, but a lot of them that were working on this new contract for Public Health England, for the first 3 months you have to be in the office. The problem I have with that is, like you say, regardless of the fact that they're an American company and regardless of the fact that they're working on a contract for Public Health England, they should be following the public health rules that Scotland has put in place. And it would appear that maybe they weren't. Maybe their social distancing wasn't quite right. Maybe they're, for example, the conditions in their canteen weren't as strict as they should have been. And if that's the case, I would like to see the company stomped upon.
I do think there might be a case, it might be good timing to make an example here.
Ooh.
Aye.
Well, it might be, because the pubs are open now, blah, blah, blah. Hammer one of the big boys that can afford to pay the fine, and everybody's ears prick up,
Exactly.
Oh, well, can they not quarantine Boris Johnson so he can't come to Scotland?
I think he's maybe number 2 leader of the free world at the moment.
He's travelling in a fridge. That's probably some kind of weird self-quarantine anyway.
And as far as I understand, anybody to do with the cabinet at Downing Street, the rules don't apply to.
Okay, well, I have to object to your description of Boris Johnson as number 2 leader in the free world at the moment.
Why? Donald Trump's number 1 leader.
Yeah.
Why would you object to Climb 2 being number 2?
he's no longer even in any of the really important, like the EU, isn't he? And even Ireland's on the Security Council, so I'm sorry.
That must really put their nose out of joint. Right, there was one other aspect that we very, in a very disciplined way, ignored to Nicola Sturgeon's press conference. That was the number of questions she got on the Russia report, which was published this morning. And having answered the first one by saying, okay, here's a wee answer to you, son, but I'm not answering any more, that was totally ignored by the rest of the press.
Mm-hmm.
What did we think of her? Well, let's do it the other way. What did we think of the Russian report? And silence.
I think I give us no answers as far as I'm concerned. The the whole thing is a pile of nonsense. It does suggest that London is remarkably inefficient and doesn't really have a grasp on what went on. It suggests that there was some kind of Russian interference in our referendum in 2014, though it's kind of about as vague on that as it's possible to be, while still mentioning Scottish independence referendum.
Wait a minute, Jimmy. That even the First Minister responded to that straight away, and it's what she referred to as open sources. Apparently, the interference in the Scottish independence referendum they're referring to is merely RT, and spite the two Russian media channels that you can get in the UK.
What I kind of thought was interesting was she was quite prepared to say that it was UK government incompetence that was being criticised.
Aye.
And then towards the end of the presser, she was asked whether she was going to undertake a review into Russian interference. This apparently came from both the
Sky
Labour Tory MP, what's his name?
Ian Murray.
Ian Murray
and Murdo Fraser's called for a review as well, an inquiry into ongoing Russian interference. Murdo conveniently forgetting just how much Russian money's been siphoned up by London Tories.
Well, neither of whom seem to realise that Nicola Sturgeon has no sway over MI6, MI5 or GHQ, and has no power to call them in to question them.
I thought she had
and by the way, she's got nothing to do with national security. It's reserved.
I thought she had her own army.
Aye, well, I was going to suggest that maybe the three of us nip up the Russian consulate with a hammer and a pair of pliers and see if we can find anything out for Nicola. You know, just to satisfy Murdo, because clearly Murdo's the man who's such a trendsetter when it comes to opinion in Scottish politics that clearly she's going to have to find a detailed answer for Murdo.
But then, I mean, it's, you know, your government, Murdo, your party is being accused of being incompetent here. So you want Nicola Sturgeon to come in and sort it out for them.
Well,
how stupid is this, man?
No, actually, it's quite a good idea. If they're prepared to, give her the budget to put on an inquiry into the incompetence of the British intelligence services, I'd be delighted to take part.
Well, I mean, right, I've got a couple of clips here. I'll play you Stuart Hosey, who sits on the committee.
He was very good.
Play you him first. It's 2 minutes, so it's quite long, but I do think it's well worth a listen. Here he is.
Studies have pointed to the preponderance of pro-Brexit or anti-EU stories on RT and Sputnik and the use of bots and trolls. The actual impact of such attempts on the result itself, by which I mean did the disinformation actually change how people voted, would be difficult, if not impossible, to prove. There has, however, been speculation that this report was going to reveal either that Russia had interfered in or sought to influence the referendum. In the committee's view, it's worse than that. The report reveals that no one in government knew if Russia interfered in or sought to influence the referendum because they did not want to know. The UK government have actively avoided looking for evidence that Russia interfered. We were told that they hadn't seen any evidence, but that is meaningless if they hadn't looked for it. The committee found it astonishing that no one in government had sought beforehand to protect the referendum from such attempts or investigated afterwards what attempts to influence it there may have been. The government, the UK government, should have recognised the threat back in 2014 in relation to the Scottish referendum, but it didn't. It didn't understand the threat until after the hack and leak operation against the Democratic National Committee in the United States. And because it was too slow to recognise the threat, it didn't take action to protect the UK in 2016. One would have thought that once the existence of that threat had been understood, seeing what had happened in the US, that someone here would have wanted to understand the extent and nature of the threat to the UK, and we wanted to see the post-referendum assessment. But there isn't one. There has been no assessment of Russian interference in the EU referendum, and this goes back to nobody wanting to touch this issue with a 10-foot pole.
I think we can safely say that's about as devastating a critique as you'll see.
Yes.
It's
interesting, the mention yet again of the DNC. That's got to be the worst place to work in the world, the Democratic National Committee. It's been violated more times than Crimea. Everybody's tried to hack that or break in over the years, man.
It's been violated more times than Matt Harry, but
I'm just stunned. I don't.
Norrie, your volume's gone mad.
Is it too high?
Mm-hmm. I noticed an interesting one in the government response, guys. 20 pages, apparently, government response that was published about 15 minutes after the Russia report. And one of the things it said is that the government has seen no evidence of any successful interference. Well, if the Russia report said there was no evidence of interference, so because they didn't go looking for it, it's a damn cert that the government would see no evidence of successful interference, would they?
That, I think, is the point. I think that they've chosen to ignore it in case they find something.
Mm-hmm.
Still up your life, Norrie.
Perish the thought that you'd
how's that?
You go looking for evidence of something that may show you up to be a.
I'm not sure about what exactly was going on. I mean, we've seen the Intelligence Committee. I mean, we've seen Stuart Hosey and not so well. I assume he was a Labour member of the previous committee, which was probably why they did all the talking instead of the new chair. Stuart Hosey was impressive. What we discovered officially was, well, ridiculous. Then you got to ask the question, why was nothing done? Was that because of all the Russian money that poured into 3.5 million, I saw quoted today, that had been given to the Tory party in recent years by Russian oligarchs?
Well, if they didn't do any investigation of either the Scottish or the EU referendums, what have they redacted out of the report? Where the Russian money has gone? Because there's a big hoo-ha about the number of lords who are being paid by various Russian companies.
Yes, Stuart Hosey made that very clear, didn't he? He wasn't happy about the number of lords admitting money. The other question that really that I want to ask is, when the Cummings gang, when Boris Johnson put up Failing Grayling to be head of the Intelligence Committee, I'm sorry, I think that could have been the dead cat. That they always knew that they were never going to get. They wanted this Russian report out. They're building up for a Cold War against Russia because that suits them.
I don't think that's really what's going on here. I think, as has been said in various pieces in the paper, that it's so intertwined now between the oligarchs' money, the City of London, London property, the Tory party, that they're looking to try and get some power back that they've lost to them. I'm not sure it's anything to do with Putin. I think they're being played by individuals here. Okay, it suits Putin for that to happen, but I think they've suddenly realized that they're being overpowered by the money that's coming in individuals' pockets from Russia.
They've just suddenly realized it. You and I have been knowing about this for 5 years.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about why they're trying to do something about it now. I think they've only just realized how invasive it is, how difficult it is. I mean, Russia has killed potentially 14 people on UK soil. Now, that's not a British government in control.
All right, but how many people have the Americans killed?
That's entirely different, because
is it entirely different?
That's not a state issue. That's a federal issue, and the UK is a state of the UK now.
A state of the US, you mean?
Sorry, of the US now, because basically they've bent over for the China question, and they're in the process of bending over for the Russian question, because the Americans aren't too happy with the Russians either.
Well, it suits both Trump, because Trump's doing very badly in his polls for his re-election. These guys are looking for a diversion. They want to build. Apparently, the West is now building up for a new Cold War against Russia and China. It's like no, it suits them.
Did you see Newsnight last night with the ex-American ambassador? The woman, she was very good. She made a very good point last night about the necessity for a coalition of Western powers. If they're going to fight China, they need to get together. And America is hampering that, because basically Trump is not in the least bit interested in allies. So he's fighting everybody.
Yeah, well, there is a pretty strong case that the Five Eyes, the so-called Five Eyes, the security services of the US, Canada, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. These, noticeably, they're all white-dominated countries, and all formerly colonies of London. Interesting that. They're all agreed that Russia and China are the baddies, and they are the real baddies. But you know, somebody said today and yesterday, what about the countries like Saudi Arabia? I mean, and then I could reference back to look at the horrors that America have done.
Yeah, but half the Middle East is under the influence of Putin anyway. I mean, Turkey's in that camp now. Can you trust Turkey anymore?
You're starting to sound like a right Russia-phobe.
Hey, whoa, I am a Russia-phobe. I'm a China-phobe. I'm an Australia-phobe. I'm an England-phobe. I mean, Scotland's where I live. It's where my family are. It's the place I want to see succeed. And if that means being nice to the Chinese, I'll be nice to the Chinese.
I did see a suggestion on Twitter yesterday that if we were to be looking for Scottish independence in a hurry, and if it depended on some kind of UDI or a dissolve the union or something like that, obviously it would depend. That would depend on international recognition, and the two countries in the world that might offer instant recognition to an independent Scotland would be China and Russia.
There you are. So Putin's a good guy. Putin's a good guy. MI6 and MI5 are baddies.
Scotland's got historic links to Russia.
There was a good show by Brian Cox. Brian Cox the other night was great.
That would very much mean the Russians would back any kind of Scottish independence anyway. The Chinese, they're not bothered with us.
Oh, I still think
I didn't think they're even bothered about Britain.
No, I still think they're bitter, Jimmy. I think they're still bitter.
Bitter about what?
Oh, about the Opium Wars. I mean, for crying out loud. I mean
they didn't give a. But if the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China don't give a monkey's about the Opium Wars, mate. Oh, they've been in power for 50 odd years, and all they want to do is protect. They're not an expansionist nation. They want to protect their own borders. Ooh. And the biggest thing to protecting their own borders has been returning Hong Kong. The next thing they want to do, but I don't think they'll manage it, is Taiwan. Yeah. But the whole Hong Kong thing shows you they don't give a damn about what Britain's got to say. They'll come out and say nice things on the news about doing trade deals with Britain and what have you, but they don't give a monkeys about us. Clearly.
I really don't think you can say they're non-expansionist, Jimmy.
Why? Who have they invaded?
Well, they don't do it with armies. They do it with engineers. When they build these massive ports for other countries, those ports become Chinese sovereign territory.
That's shocking.
Terrible. Oh, that's
shocking. Helping countries in Africa.
Right. Jimmy, the important bit of that statement is Chinese sovereign territory.
Norrie, they didn't put army bases in them like the Yanks do.
Yet.
Okay, well, I'm the current history student. How do you think the British Empire worked? Bases in India, bases in China.
They went in, they murdered enough of the population so that the leader agreed to become British.
Yes, but well, initially, you take somewhere like China. Initially, they just had Hong Kong, and then they were selling opium to China. The Chinese government didn't want that, threatened Britain. Britain and France sailed up the river to Beijing, flattened the royal palace and said, shut the fuck up. And we would now want Shanghai and another 3 ports as Western bases. I mean, can you imagine that being done to Britain 150 years ago, and the British wouldn't be angry?
I'm sorry, the Americans do that to Britain all the time. See that British protectorate you've got? We want you to throw everybody out so we can build an American air base there.
See that RAF base in whatever it is in East Anglia. It's got a name RAF on it, but don't bother trying to come through the gates unless you're American.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the Yanks are everybody's at it. The Chinese are no worse than the Americans or the British historically.
But we talked about Andrew Marr yesterday, guys, and the Andrew Marr show, when the Chinese ambassador was talking. They're not interested. They're looking into the end of this century and the middle of next century. That's where Chinese foreign policy is kind of aimed. At that point, they intend to be not just the biggest economy on the planet, but probably twice the size of any other economy on the planet. At that point, India will probably be the second largest economy on the planet. And the Americans will be sitting around cowering behind a big wall in a country bristling with missiles in the hope that everybody just leaves them alone.
Well,
can we return to what I think it was both of you guys said about Andrew Marr on Sunday? It was like he was trying to make foreign policy for the UK. What on earth was Andrew Marr doing, interviewing the Russian ambassador, the Chinese ambassador? This is the duty of the Foreign Office. Aye,
but let's be clear, mate. I didn't like Andrew Marr, but I'd rather Andrew Marr sat doing with these people.
Yeah, but than Dominic Raab. All right, can I just finish? Who put them up to the BB? Who put them up to do this? There seems to be a concerted Cold War started here.
Stuart, you're back on this treadmill of conspiracy. Andrew Marr was doing what journalists do. He got an interview with the Russian ambassador and the Chinese ambassador, and he asked them questions.
You're not that naive to believe what you just said.
Right, Stuart. I don't have conspiracy theories coming out my ears. That's true. But you seriously think the British government is controlling Andrew Marr when he interviews the Russian ambassador and the Chinese ambassador?
Well, it depends how you put it. You're good at putting it like that, but I'll leave my statement where it is. I don't.
Well, I'm sorry. He asked questions I think any journalist would have asked.
Aye, and he got the response particularly for the Chinese that he didn't want to hear. We didn't give a shit about you. Your country's a diddy wee country, and in the next 30 years, it'll be diddier. How low do we think the British economy is going to sink, by the way? Do you think it'll be the 8th or the 9th largest economy on the planet by the end of the year?
Don't, when you talk about that, I think about when do I have to sell my furniture to eat? Or am I going to go out there and kill rats to survive?
Sure, it's all right. You can join one of your conspiracies and they'll keep you in bread and circuses.
I'm not talking about conspiracies. I mean, how low is this economy going to go with Brexit coming next year? Goodness knows what we'll be eating.
Well, it's interesting to note that the EU, who apparently can never agree on anything, came to an agreement over a 750 billion package to boost the economy of the other 27 member states. And it was awfully interesting to note that Greece, who we're often compared to, remember, well, they often tell us our economy is as bad as the Greek economy. The Greeks copped for 72 billion euros out of this. What did we get? 21 million for London, and we're meant to jump up and down and be happy.
Right, guys, I'm going to do the Norrie's a killjoy thing here. We got 21 million in Barnett consequentials.
Yes.
But we are entitled, or will have spent on us, or on our behalf by Westminster, a good 3 billion, I think it is.
No,
about who controls the money, this is what the question is, but there will be more money spent in Scotland.
It's more than that. It's about
only on
8.5 or 9 in total, but even then it doesn't really come close to the 72 billion that the Greeks have copped for.
No, it doesn't. No, you're right. And I believe Greece is now in surplus. I think it now sells more than it imports, which is a bit better than the UK as a whole.
Aye. Well, I just think it's given just what a basket case Europe's meant to be, and how disastrous we were told being a member of Europe would be, particularly by the end of this year. We should really have been out middle of this year, shouldn't we? But it's interesting to note that 27 nations get round a table, thrash out a deal that costs money to some of them, but is useful to all of them.
But look
and
at
the
all
four nations of the United Kingdom could never do the same thing, because we'd just be dictated to by one of those nations.
But look at all the time and energy that was wasted on talking to each other and coming to an agreement. The Westminster government can't afford to waste all that time. Quote from the Financial Times yesterday: UK dealings with the devolved administrations are characterised by an almost colonial mindset and need a rethink.
All right, I've got to respond to that. Apparently, yesterday, the devastating votes, took place in the Commons yesterday, which means that the NHS is not safe, that none of the devolved administrations can have any veto on them being their NHS being sold off, and what is it called? The internal market thing, Pat, went through as well. So we're all screwed.
So I have to tell you, Stuart, that you're just being a scaremonger. I have promised you, like I have over so many things in the past, that you won't need protected because we won't do exactly what suits us to make our bank balances bigger. Quote unquote, any Tory cabinet minister you want to speak to.
Aye.
And that's their line. That's their line. You don't need protected.
We can absolutely rely on the evidence of our own eyes until the evidence of our own eyes tells us something the Tories don't want us to see.
Well, do you know the really scary thing about this? The way these dominoes are set up now, you're not going to get to see the trade agreement for 5 years. Our courts are going to be overridden by international market courts, for want of a better word. Our government and devolved governments are going to have to kowtow to the decisions of these courts. And you won't get to see any of the trade deals because of market sensitivity.
There's nothing surprising in that. Look what Tories, look, Thatcher removed all the power from the London government, the regional Strathclyde, the regional local government in England. They're centralising power. They're just doing it again. They're going to take all the power away from the devolved regions.
Well, the point I'm making here, Stuart, is
they're handing it over to America.
They'll have sold the NHS before we know anything about it. It'll be 5 years before we get to understand how they did it. Because it's all going to be secret. Well, you might be dead a lot quicker than you think if there's no NHS for you to go to.
Well,
I wonder what the price was to the American lobbying industry for this whole thing. You know, it all comes out of Grafton Street or whatever, but how much have they had to chuck at UK politicians and UK lobbyists to make all this happen.
Well, have a look. Liam Fox is a name that's been in their pockets for, we've known he's been in the health lobby's pockets for how many years now? Probably 15 years. I mean, that's why.
That'll be Dr. Liam Fox.
Oh, Dr. Fox.
That'll be Dr. Liam the Failure Fox.
Oh, I had to get
I mean, how many times has he lost his job for being a FUD?
Well, because he's corrupt.
Christ, we're busily trying to make him head of the World Trade Organization. It's outrageous that we've nominated somebody like that for a position at the WTO. And
that would be a really good idea, because
it was hilarious.
All the agreements secret as well.
No, it was absolutely ludicrous, mate. There was something on Newsnight the other week where there was a French guy who was basically explaining Liam Fox doesn't understand what happens at the World Trade Organization. They have to explain everything to him 4 or 5 times before he gets it, because he's too dim to get it. And we try to make him head of the organization. Outrageous.
Well, I think maybe we've kicked the arse out of that, lads. I was going to finish off with a clip, which is one of the Labour members of the Intelligence Committee.
Oh, didn't he? He was dull as ditch water.
Aye, but he was getting, what he was doing, he was getting his retaliation in first. A list of things that the government have said or will say that turn out not to be true, which I think is worth finishing on.
You've lost me there. Okay, well, if you're going to finish in that, which I do like, I like that way to finish a program. I'd just like to remind people of something for your tonight's nightmare. That yesterday, Donald Trump was asked live on Fox News whether he would accept the result of the vote for the presidential election, and he refused to say that he would. And he has been talking to this lawyer. Do you remember, was it waterboarding? The CIA managed to find a lawyer to make it waterboarding as a torture to get information out of the Taliban, etc., was to say that that was legal. Donald Trump has hired this lawyer to prove that he's got executive powers to do things. For example, what he's doing in Portland. We'll leave that for another day. But anyway, the horror show over there is getting worse and worse.
Oh, they'll do. I mean, he's going to jail. If he doesn't get another 4 years, he will go to jail.
No, he won't. He'll refuse he'll refuse to leave the White House.
Nah,
he can't refuse. Can he refuse? He can't. There's no way in which an American president can set aside an election result.
I can't see it, to be honest, unless he manages to manipulate some sort of civil war.
His own party, when he loses this election, his own party will march up Pennsylvania Avenue and drag him out there by what's left of his hair. Not a Democrat will need to get involved in that. He's made too many enemies in his own party.
Right. Here's a clip for you to finish with of the Intelligence Committee getting their retaliation in first.
Bye.
Okay, here we go.
Under the Justice and Security Act, the committee must send its report to the Prime Minister for confirmation that they can be published. As has been widely reported, the Prime Minister failed to provide his confirmation that this report could be published within the standard 10 working days. And as a result, the House rose for the general election before the report could be published. There was no reason for this delay. Number 10 have said that there are only 6 days in which to look at this report. That is not true. The Prime Minister has also said, the office has also said, that it usually takes 6 weeks to actually get this confirmation. Can I also say that's categorically not true? The number 10 has also reported that it also had to go back around government for comment. Again, this is not true. It had already been through the processes. The final point is said that the proper processes hadn't been followed in the consideration of this report. Can I also say that categorically is not true? Everyone who needed to see the report in government had done so. It was now waiting for the Prime Minister to agree the report, which was sent to him on the 17th of October.
So basically, there's a list of all the excuses that the government has used about the delay in the report.
He's far too polite, eh? That is not true, that is not true. Just call them liars, mate. If they're liars, call them.
Well, part of it, he did a list where he said, that is a lie, that is a lie.
What I don't understand is why people keep using the term, and number 10 said. Now, why don't they say the spokesperson for Dominic Cumming or the spokesperson for somebody? Number 10 cannot speak. Number 10 is a number. And I don't see why people outside number 10 should use the term.
Because they're protecting their access.
I think you're quite right, Stuart, though. It's what we might call a politeness, but it's a politeness that this administration and Dominic Cummings in particular do not deserve to be extended to.
Yeah, but that committee doesn't need to use the term just because journalists do.
Well, they're protecting access. I mean, you see what's happened with Newsnight and the Radio 4 morning programme. They're not getting government ministers on now.
When they say number 10, they are actually simply saying Dominic Cummings, because he runs the number 10 office.
Maybe the case, but they don't do it.
Why not?
Because they're scared. They're scared they lose access.
No, there's a quote I'll keep.
Well, that's why they do it. And number 10 has already punished Newsnight and
all right, but I'm not
the
talking
program.
about, all right, but I'm talking beyond the journalists whose job depends upon it.
Well, it applies as much to members of committees. People can refuse to go in front of committees. You know,
the Intelligence and Security Committee, mate. If somebody was to refuse to go in front of that, it ought to cost them their career.
And if
watch this space, Jimmy.
And if that politician just now who'd made a very important statement about a very important report had said it was Dominic Cummings and not number 10, he would have had a huge impact.
Aye.
Which is why he didn't do it, because he wants to maintain access. Okay, guys. Thanks very much for today. Jimmy Hutton, Stuart Lockhead. I'm Norris Stewart.
Cheerio.
Thanks for listening, folks, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow when we will have the presser. Remember, it's 12:15, those of you that watch it. But again, thanks for listening. We'll catch up with you, as I say, on Wednesday for Prime Minister's questions. Or are they shut down now?
No, it's the last one.
This is the last one.
Last one. Last PMQs of this session. Cheers for now.